Blessed be y'all, this is Jen Fremont. I am going to talk about my personal struggle today a little bit. From the point that I woke up to, I guess to today, I don't know. Depends on how long I end up talking on here. But in the late 90s, 98, 99, something like that, I was, like most people, I was very much a television watcher. I was, I went to work every day, and, barely had enough money to survive. And just did the usual sort of corporate thing, and I got a PC. I got a Packard Bell PC, which was just a piece of junk. But what that allowed me to do was there was a late night radio talk show called Coast to Coast AM, and I think it still exists. I have not listened in a long time because it's not the same program anymore. It's the same bullshit that you will get on regular talk radio, and it's a nice new agey crap, and they've got the conventional physicist on there that tells you exactly how it is because he knows from experience. Anyway. I just have to laugh because you listen to like Carl Sagan or I can't think of the other guy now, but they talk with such authority, and when you do the research, you find out what they're talking about is actually just a theory. But I started listening to this program, and one of the things that they had on there was a witch by the name of Evelyn Paglini, who has now passed away, I'm sorry to say. But she talked about using witchcraft in a defensive manner. She was not the nicey witch that, harm none and all that sort of stuff. It was, you mess with me or mine and I'm coming to get you type thing, which is pretty much my philosophy too. I don't know if I really learned that philosophy from her, but that's the way I feel about things. And, I sat down at I was being attacked in my dreams by a family member. My mother was also in those situations too. We were being brought together in the same dreamscape and stuff like that. And I had to do something about it. And so I bought a candle book. First thing I did was buy a candle burning book, and at the time I had a hard time finding oils and stuff like that, which I eventually did. A lot of the process was just driving around, going to these different stores and stuff, and finding these stores, talking to people. It was the beginning of a magical practice. I did not know anything about magic. I had always thought magic was somehow evil. I did not even guess I did know that, the New Age / occult section of the bookstore existed, but that was one of those sections that I would walk past quickly because, you don't go into that section of the bookstore. God will get you, and you will go to hell and all that good stuff. But, I finally sat down at the altar and I lit my first candle, and it was like, I am home. I am home. And that was the beginning for me. Having the courage to light that first candle. Not knowing if a lightning bolt was going to come down and hit me. I just knew if I did not do something, I had a bigger problem on my hands. So, I went for a while doing candle burning. I bought some more books, I read some things, and kept listening to this program. Started buying some of the books that they had on the program. The first one that I bought and read was The Orion Mystery. Robert Bauval, and I can't think of the other guy's name. But that was the first book that I had read in a long time. When I was in junior high and high school, I read a lot. I loved reading. I always had a book with me. I guess in high school I started in marching band, so that kind of overlapped that reading period that they had in the morning, so I got away from reading so much. And it wasn't until much later, I guess in my early 20s I got into the Doctor Who books and read a lot of those, but I didn't do a lot of reading of other stuff, and this was the first one that I sat down and read, and it just blew my mind. And I thought, there is a lot of stuff out here that is not commonly known, but it's there if you go and look for it. And I started looking for it. I read Jim Marrs's book, Ruled by Secrecy, which is still a really good book for anybody to start with. But as I describe it, it only gives you an overview of the rabbit hole. When I read it, I thought, I had actually explored deeply into things. And the more I explored, the more I saw, that was only an overview. Everything else is much, much more complicated than you could imagine. And I went along for a while. I had an incident in which I was being attacked magically, and I defended myself. And I injured the person that was attacking me, that turned out to be a family member, and not the family member that I thought it would be. That rattled me for a long time. There was about 6 years, 7 years, something like that I did not actually sit down at my altar. It was still there in my bedroom. It gathered a lot of dust. Sometimes I would dust it off and think I was going to do something, but I didn't. I planned many rituals, which I never did. And it took me a long time to sort out in my mind exactly what I had done and how I had done it. And I knew that magic was a serious thing from that, because, I had not physically been anywhere close to this person, and this person was injured. So I got laid off from my job in '06, and I was looking for all this time too. I kept reading. I never put any of the stuff into practice, but I still kept reading and kept reading and kept reading. Stuff about magic, stuff about conspiracy, stuff about secret societies, and all that stuff overlaps with each other. 9/11 happened, and I got into the stuff about 9/11. And in '06 I got laid off from my job, and I'm trying to look for another job, and I find this site called Meetup, and I'm looking for something to network for a job, and I found the Internet Entrepreneurs and started going to that. But one day what popped up was a witches group. It was one of those things, if you like this, you might like this sort of thing. And I don't know how those were tied together, but I kind of think that, that was the universe's way of saying, hey, there's other folks out here. You need to go talk to them. So I joined this group. I started going to the group. Started talking about my experiences. For the first time, I met people that didn't think I was a nutball. That understood the practices that I was doing. And it was still a couple of more years before I actually did anything magical again. Actually sat down at the altar and did anything. But I had to have that. I never have had a real job since then. I got a temp job for like 90 days, but things have just happened that I've been able to support myself in other ways, and it has been a blessing that I don't have to go to that corporate soul-sucking world every day. I have not had a real job in over 10 years now, and I don't miss it. I don't want to go back to it. I don't think I could do that. The last job I had, I worked on the HARP project, doing transmitters for that. And that's one of those things that's out there in the realm of, quote, conspiracy theory. Oh my God. I read the 1,000-page test spec. I had to for my job. Yes, you can use it for weather modification. Yes, you can use it for earthquakes. Yes, it is a scalar weapon that can be used to mess with people's heads. Yes, it is. And that was another thing that just broke my head open. Because here I am, I've got a piece of this thing that, I tested some of the pieces that went into those things. And my test stamp is on there. It exists. It is techno magic on a grand scale. If if you watch the movie Hellboy, you will see a interesting device that they use to open up a gateway. That is real tech. That is real tech. That is torsional physics being applied. And that is the sort of stuff that HAARP can do on a huge scale, on a massive scale. Well, that cracked my head open. That really cracked my head open. And, as time went on, I was doing some other things, and I found that I was having a hard time staying sober enough to actually do the things that I needed to do. And I knew that I had to stop drinking. That was the next big magical thing that I did. Is I concentrated on why I drank. Removing the programming that was keeping me locked in that loop. At this point, I have not needed to take a drink since April 22nd, 2010. That does not mean that, I may not take a drink tomorrow. It's one day at a time. Today, I do not need to take a drink. And, the biggest part of that struggle was letting go of the idea that I had to have the wife, the family, the 2.3 children, or whatever the number is that's average, the minivan, the picket fence, all of that stuff to be happy, to be a real human being, because I didn't think I was a real human being without that sort of stuff. And that just ripped my guts out, letting go of all that stuff. I can't say that I'll never get married. I can't say that I'll never have children, but at this point, I don't have to have that in order to be happy, and I believed that I had to have that. I believed that with every fiber of my being back then, that I had to have that. And it took about 3 years or so, and went to AA for a long time, and eventually I got to the point of I cannot stay sane around these insane people anymore. I have done what I needed to do. It is time to move on. So I did. I got my spiritual program going, and I am living it right now. Part of it is making this video, telling people about things. All of this time I keep studying. In the last 18 months or so, I've gone through almost 200 books. I found audio books and just started listening because I found it hard to actually sit down and read a paper book. I've read several paper books, but in that time, but for the most part, I listened and I listened and I listened, because that's how I first started, was listening. I guess I am a very auditory person in that way. But at this point, I'm kind of assimilating. When I went to the House Keprut thing, I finished up an audiobook, and I started another one. But when I was leaving there after the thing, I could not turn it on. I just could not get back into that frame of mind. But that's what I've been doing, is just reading and reading and reading, and I try to bring those little tidbits to you. And every time I find something that I think is a truth, something else comes along and messes with that. Most of the things in history, we cannot prove that they happened or they did not happen. We have records that say they happened. That does not mean those records are accurate. We have records that do not agree with each other. Which one's the truth? Which one is not? And most of the time, the history books have been written by the people that have a certain agenda to keep people under control, to keep people thinking a certain way, and that is, history is taught as fact when it is conjecture for the most part. The Bible is another one. There are so many different versions of the manuscripts that went into the Bible. There are so many contradictions in the Bible. People won't read the same thing that's written in the different Gospels and see what the differences are. That's called parallel reading. Most people do what's called devotional reading, where they'll just take a verse or a chapter and they will read that and meditate on that and so forth. They don't compare it to other things. They don't compare the certain incidents described in one book and those incidents described in another book and how they compare. We cannot know exactly what was originally written in those books. There are, the last figure that I heard, there are some 30,000 biblical manuscripts, and there are millions of differences in those manuscripts. In I believe it was 1890, and at that time there was approximately 3,000 biblical manuscripts available. There was a man that sat down and wrote a book about the differences between the manuscripts, and he had to stop at 20,000 just because there were 100,000 more, but he had to stop his book somewhere, so he just picked 20,000. And that shows you how much difference there is. When you understand that, it changes the way you think about things. I strive to live without beliefs. This is a very hard thing to do. I think about many different theories. I think about how things may have been, and such. And as time goes on, I find it easier to suspend my belief and to put myself for a time into a certain way of thinking. It has helped me a little bit to get into the Eastern mind and how the Eastern mind thinks. I will probably never know all of how it is to think like an Eastern person thinks, because they have grown up with an entirely different set of programming, an entirely different languages and that sort of stuff. Language itself presents a huge difference in how people think. I never really understood this. I listened to this one Red Ice Radio, and they were talking about something called the Box Saga. And it is a saga that this family has held for something like 1,000 years. And it is passed down from generation to generation orally. And as the man that is now publishing it, because the family, they had to go outside of the family to pass this on. It takes 20 years of training to learn this. 20 years, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day to learn this. And people will say, well, it's an oral history, so it's going to change. But what I learned from this is that it can't. The language is constructed in a certain manner that you can't just change one word, one letter, take a paragraph out and put another paragraph in. It is constructed in a way that it cannot change. And the Western mind cannot grasp anything that is constructed in such a manner. And when I say it cannot change, it would make no sense if anything was changed. The entire thing would have to be reconstructed from scratch. And that is a huge thing. And that just blew my mind. In the Western tradition, we do have the idea that, things get changed through oral history and stuff like that. But there's a double standard there. We say that the Bible is the inherent, unchanging Word of God. But we've got 30,000 manuscripts with many millions of differences between those manuscripts. And we say that cannot change. This came from a people that their entire thing was built on changing the story to fit the audience. This was not considered, the Semitic people did not consider this a bad thing. We today probably would consider it a bad thing, but it was just how they were. They changed the story to fit the audience. And they saw nothing wrong with that. In most cases, probably the audience saw nothing wrong with that. They saw it as something helpful so that they could understand. And that tradition has been passed on to us. It has been passed on to us in a way that is actually subconscious. We do this without even thinking about it. I've gone through a whole bunch of things. This is a much longer video than I have ever done. And I hope you got to the end of this and found some stuff in here that you like. Check out my other videos. I've got all kinds of stuff. I'm doing stuff on cabals and secret societies and all kinds of things. So I think I'm going to end this here. This is Jen Fremont. Blessed be y'all.